Greetings, everyone. This is Tandasizwe Shimaringa, host of Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media. And I want to welcome you to this special edition of Rootwork entitled Can't Stop Our Blackness, which is a groundbreaking show brought to us by our comrade, sister, activist, and journalist, Rosa Clemente. This show dives deep into the rich tapestry of Afro Latinx and Black Latinx identities. The show aims to foster understanding, celebrate resilience, and empower voices often overlooked in mainstream narratives. Today's show from February 20th of this year, February 20th, 2025, features organizer Hiram Rivera.
Okay, good. All right. This is my little theme song, fam. I'm gonna see how I can interlay it in the future, but Stickman from Dead Prez made it for me, so I'm gonna play it.
They don't want you to know the truth.
So if you heard the theme music at the end, that's my niece Raina when she was younger. I love it because they really don't want us they don't want to talk about what's going on. Every day's a shit show. It's only been 30 days. I feel like it's been 20 years. I don't know. But I'm so happy that my numbers keep growing. So first and foremost, always thank you to my sponsor, Cooperation Jackson, both for Disrupt the Chaos. Y después aquí, Can't Stand Our Blackness, right? I've been wanting to do a show really focused on Afro-Black Latinx, identity, culture, and politics, and that's why I have like my comrade, like anytime I want to go deep and like truly see it from a different lens or our racial construct, I'll call Hiram and be like, what are we supposed to do about this? And we both, our political homes are the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, so that's important, at least for me to say that's who raised me to be a movement person, my comrades, all of them in Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. Yeah, so thank you. Keep watching it, keep sharing. And I have a bunch of things I want to kick it with Hiram, but Hiram, just a couple of things you want the audience to know, and also your organization.
Yeah, thank you for the invite, Rosa. Always love talking to you. So for those who don't know me, my name is Hiram Rivera. I've spent the last 20 years as an organizer, working on a number of different issues, first starting out with the issue of political prisoners, but then working on the issue of education justice, juvenile justice, and most recently as the executive director of an organization called the Community Resource Hub for Safety and Accountability, focusing on the issue of policing, police abolition, criminal justice as a whole, and also the founder of our George Jackson Organizing School. And like you said, longtime member of the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, and a bunch of different other organizations, and currently residing here in the city of Philadelphia. Raised in New Haven, Connecticut, but here in Philly now. So,
yeah, like you were in the two cities for Boricuas after New York and Chicago, and now I mean I know you know, but Pennsylvania has the highest rate, almost the highest rate of Puerto Ricans, the state, which is why like you heard about us a couple of times. But and when I mean us, I mean Puerto Rico, because apparently we don't fit into any politics, no geopolitical map. And when I say that is, first and foremost, folks, you gotta understand, Puerto Ricans were born as American citizens, right? So Latin America, or even, well, it's always Latin American studies, they do not include us geopolitically, right? Which I don't have a problem with. I'm like, because we're dope and we're in the Caribbean, so that's on y'all. And part of it is too in academia. Latin America also doesn't deal with race very good at working class people and labor, given the dictators and the overthrows in so many governments. But it's always like Puerto Rico's a stepchild, as opposed to like the reason y'all even doing that is because we were doing that from the giddy up before 1898. You know, so I'm so happy to have you on. I wanted to ask you, first and foremost, when you were growing up, did you know like phenotypically skin color was different, or it was like, at least for me, just that's a fam?
Yeah. So like I said, I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. I grew up in the hill section of New Haven. So folks who don't know anything about Connecticut, which most people don't, New Haven is the home of Yale University. So it's primarily known for where Yale is at and known for our pizza. Neither of those two things represent the hood, right? And the majority of folks in New Haven. And so I grew up in a mixed neighborhood. All the neighborhoods I grew up in New Haven were mixed, Black and Puerto Rican predominantly. And so, you know, color-wise, sure, right? We knew, like, very aware of our color in relationship to other folks. There weren't white kids who lived there, but they were white-skinned Puerto Ricans. And even on my family, right? As Puerto Ricans, my mother's dark skin, my father obviously is white skin, and the family kind of splits up in that sort of way with all kinds of shades in between. In terms of understanding Blackness growing up, didn't really think about it, right? We kind of grew up together. We all were in each other's homes. When I say us, I'm talking about, right, African American kids, Puerto Rican kids, which is kind of all we had back in the 80s in New Haven.
Right.
Yeah. And so we just grew up together, and it never became a thing. There were always like, there'd be some jokes every once in a while about like Goya being this or Mira, or kids trying to speak Spanish, but it was never like taken as a diss worth fighting over, right? We were like,
Hostile. It wasn't hostile.
it was family, and so you didn't think about it. We're all like breaking together. We're all like beatboxing
Right.
and kind of stuff together. So it was something that never really got spoken about. And as a kid, you're also not able to pick up on just certain anti-Black things that exist culturally, right? Because it's wrapped in culture, it's wrapped in sort of like nationalism stuff. Especially if you're talking about hair texture and that sort of thing, right? I didn't become conscious of my Blackness until I moved when I was 14 years old. My family moved us out of New Haven, Connecticut, into a Connecticut suburb, so we can go to high school with the white folks, right? Because the suburb, it was safe, the education was better, right? Everything was so much better than New Haven. But also a big part of that was I started high school in 1990. The Latin Kings had taken over Connecticut in terms of like gang stuff. And so it felt like damn near every Puerto Rican was a Latin king. Violence was just incredible. And so our parents didn't want us becoming Latin kings, which I don't think we were on track to do so, but they didn't want us around that and moved us out to the burbs. That is when I became conscious of a difference. And so one, when you get out to the suburbs and you're around like nothing but suburban white kids, it is a completely different world. The slang is different. What they think is cool is different. The music they listen to is different. Their worldview. I mean, it was literally like 15 minutes away from New Haven. You entered a completely different world that we didn't understand. And I knew it was a problem when first day of school, my brother and I, we lay out our outfits. It was August, so we had the starter outfits. It was the pinstripe baseball short set that you see in the summertime video from Will Smith, right? And our Patrick Ewing sneakers. I mean, it was tough, right? It was like killing the first day. And we walk in, and we walked into the cafeteria where all the students were at, and the whole school just kind of stopped and stared at us. And they're just in there in like these dingy clothes, hemp hoodies, some Birkenstocks. We looking at them like, what the fuck? They looking at us like, what the fuck? And that's when it started. And so to wrap up this long story, as you can expect, going into that school, we were faced with a lot of direct and indirect racism, right?
Yeah.
So being called niggas, being called coons, being called monkeys, being called all, I mean, words I had never heard of, right? The indirect racism that was coming from the administration themselves. And so, you know, they would say there was a group of us who were students of color, so blended Black, Latino, Filipino, or whatever, that we became friends throughout high school, and they would invent rules that said we couldn't hang out in groups larger than 2 because we made the teachers nervous. And we made
Wait, what do you mean? The school was more white? What did it mean? Like you guys and the Black people?
Yeah, so there was a small group. There was maybe like total. So what you had was the ABC program, a Better Chance program from New York City, that takes academically like astute students and sends them to schools in suburbs in New York and in Connecticut and Jersey. And so we had some of those students in our school, and then we had just some other students who were like Indian or Asian or whatever. But grand total in my high school class, non-white students, was about 5 of us. In the school total, maybe 10. My graduating class was close to 1,000 students. So you have about 4,000 students in school, maybe 10 are students of color. And so the school administration, the principal, had said that we were not allowed to hang out on free period or in the cafeteria in groups larger than 2 because we made the teachers and we made the students nervous. Now, we did it anyway, right? But that was just where we started to pick up on that. So what happens? This is 1991. I start high school. 1992, Malcolm X, the movie, comes out. My father, who's not, I wouldn't say holds revolutionary politics, decides like, yo, I'm gonna take you, me and my brother, to go see Malcolm X, the movie, because he says it's history. You got to see it. Right? My father looks Italian, right? And so, we're like, all right, I'm 14 years old, right? I don't know. I see it, and my mind is blown away. Now I know Dr. Jerry Ball hates that movie, right? But and for all the political and historical inaccuracies, I get that. But at that time, at 14, my mind was blown away, right?
Right.
Finally, it was like language and context put to what we had been living in and we're going through in that school. Because the way my parents understood that was, well, don't fight those white kids because you'll get arrested and we don't have money for lawyers, right? And beat them in academics, right? Like get better test grades in them, get better. But that's hard. It's hard to focus. You know, I had teachers call me,
and also we're teenagers. Like no matter what, like we're going through the most biological, mental growing.
Right.
So there's a lot on that.
I had teachers calling me homeboy. I had a math teacher who said, yo, homie, you be doing your homework today? I never forgot that call. I never forgot, just like that. Right. So it's like, I'm not trying to do your work. I'm not trying to do nothing for you people. Right. And you start wilding out. I get a Malcolm X poster. My mom notices that I'm kind of like just withdrawn, just not doing well in school, just not having it. We literally cried. We want to go back home. We said, send us home, take us home. We don't want to be here. A whole year of that. She walks in my room. She looks at the Malcolm X poster and she goes, I have friends who do that. That's what she said. And I looked, right? And it was NOI. My mom worked in a jewelry store in New Haven. Across the street was a sports clothing store type thing. And the brothers were members of the local chapter of the NOI. So she hooked it up. She would drive me to New Haven, bring me back to New Haven. The brothers would pick me up and would take me to the mosque, right? Because she's just connecting it to the movie and whatever. I talked to Minister Muhammad was his name. And that first day we're talking, and I said, you know, Minister, I'm dealing with this thing. I was like, I go to school, they're calling me nigger, they're calling me jigger, they're calling me all these things. But I'm Puerto Rican. I don't understand why they're saying that to me. Now, fuck them. I get what they're trying to do. So we have problems because you're trying to be racist, but I don't understand why they're using those slurs for me. Right? I'm Puerto Rican. And he puts his hand on my shoulder, he looks at me and goes, brother, right? And then just broke it all the way down. And right there, I was conscious of that, like, conscious of what it meant to be Black, conscious of Blackness, conscious. We grew up in it in my house. Like I said, my mom is dark skinned. We had, you know, my father was a bookkeeper and did bookkeeping for a Black book publishing company called Harambe that had so we had the books in our house. Right. But for me, there's Black and we come from Africans, but we're Puerto Rican, right? Understanding in a nationality kind of way. We're Puerto Rican. African American is something else. With family, because they're in my house. We live together. We, you know, it's all love. And the minister broke that down on this, you know, saying that it goes beyond nationality. And there's just
so that day it was like, were you a senior, junior, or what? What grade were you in?
I was a freshman.
Oh, so you were ninth grade. Okay.
I was like 14 by that time. It was like 14, 15. So going into my sophomore year, because
So right now,
I'm 92, so it's like going to my sophomore year.
yeah. So wait, well, you're a little bit younger than me. So what year did you graduate from high school?
95.
Okay, so this is right now, this is so fascinating because we've never gone deep about our families, because that was your experience was almost the same as mine with two differences, right? So born, raised, and not born, raised partly in the Bronx. Like, remember the blackout of 1977, like it was happening, remembering, like, you know, bricks and destruction and all that ugliness around that. But yeah, the same for me, like African American people, Puerto Ricans for the most part. But then my mom moves us to the suburbs, and part of it was the public education system. But where she moved us was a little, it's called a village, Elmsford, New York. And we were definitely the first Latino family, period, right? But when I start going, I'm being made fun of as in second and third grade, right? Because I have an accent, or I look different, or like people made fun of my nose. It was just like, and also I went through that ugly duckling, like, yeah, 13, I would have been like, girl, I hope it gets better. And it did. But it was such a small community, but it was African American, white, like 100, and then us. Yeah. The African American community is actually more affluent than the white American community, but we knew each other. I graduated with 33 people. So we went to junior high and high school together, 7th to 12th grade, right? You know everybody, and everybody knows you. And like, you know, if you're smoking a cigarette, someone's going to call your parents, or things like that. I mean, I even tell people I never ever saw a police officer my entire growing up in Elmsford, New York. But they also made me go to immersive language because I was bilingual, right? And I have so much hate for the way they treated me, where they would pull me out. And I have had subsequent things with my mom to be like, did you know what was happening? You know, she's like, I didn't want you to feel different. I was like, but I was different. But as I got into high school, I specifically was with Black people, right? Like, there were maybe 2 other Latinos in the school. Now the school's almost all Latino. And I was in everything. Cheerleading, we won state championships, basketball, was state track. I did everything and anything because I was also growing up not really knowing, like, why am I here in this privileged 5 days a week? Because then every weekend my mom would take us to see our cousins in the Bronx. And I'm so grateful she did that. I began to realize the older I was that, like, what their counselors are telling them is not what my counselor is telling me. Right. They're like, Puerto Rican women get pregnant, welfare. And then my counselor, a Black man, was like, where do you want to go to college, kind of thing. So I had to deal with that when I went to college, but more around, like, I think like you, I knew I was Puerto Rican. Everything else was like secondary. Like, I don't even remember if I would say, wait, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm an American citizen. Why? I don't ever remember my parents having that talk with me. I remember staying connected to Puerto Rico twice a year. We were there with Abuela and our cousins. So it's kind of weird. So when I started knowing all this in Black studies, I just became really angry at them. Like, how don't I know that there was an independence movement? How don't I understand, like, everybody in our family, Black is Black, white is white. Then certain times when we went to see certain families, the older I got, they were using the N-word. They were even calling their friends who are Puerto Rican, spit. Like, I remember one day I had to ask, like, my dad, and he was like, that's how they made fun of us. And then I read Rosa Clemente and had watched every documentary, what they did to him, you know, and he talks about the first time when he was called the N-word, you know, and he said, no, just like Puerto Riqueño. And they were like, yeah, we don't really care. Like, you Black. And that one of the things he did when they would travel down south on those buses and it was still Jim Crow, like segregation, right. He would be like, y'all ain't going up in that room unless I'm going up in that room. But to me, he's still like the most visible, like Black Boricua in my memory and framing of all my years. And I think our parents, I mean, either way, we're here now, but it's also like, it's fascinating to me to also have been in a place where, not fascinating, it was super privileged.
Yeah.
And also everybody did get along.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like, and lastly, that's what happened to me. Then I go see Do the Right Thing, and I meet my new boyfriend. He's Nation of Gods and Earth, 5%er. We go to Harlem on the weekends, and his Hebrew Israelites, yo sis, you're not from Spain. I was like, yeah, I know that part. Sis, you're Black. I'm like, no, my boyfriend's Black. And they're like, no, you Black queen. And it was like the Hebrew Israelites right there, like, and you should know about the Moorish, all that. So when I got to college and I began to see that it was more the African-American community, the Caribbean community that brought me in. Well, a lot of the other people I knew were in that kind of Latin American concept and organizations. I didn't. Yeah. I mean, I never even date to this day, I've never dated a Puerto Rican man. Mm-hmm. Maybe they weren't around or I was that chick, but I will say this. I think that being a Puerto Rican woman with curly hair, straight hair, and the lightest skin, there's like privileges to that. Yeah, so it's just fascinating to hear you say it because it's like we only 5 years apart, but had that same type of experience. So you're going to high school, and then like, what's the next?
So I'm in high school. I started going to Nation of Islam meetings, mm-hmm. and that is my politicization, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it starts to give me language to articulate what exactly was happening. So we always understood that we were Black, right? Because like I said, my mom is very dark. My family is dark. We understood Africa. There was never a shame about that. And we always felt the same. We're tied to our so-called African-American friends and best friends who were in our house, would sleep over, right? We never saw a difference. What was kind of like mind-boggling was when I went to the suburbs where they were differentiating. So on one end, white folks said, we don't care what you are. You're all niggas.
Right.
But they were still differentiating. There was which that never happened in New Haven. Right, which causes kind of like, well, what does that mean to be Puerto Rican, African American? Like, what does that mean, right? And this is where the minister and those folks start to break it down. And so it's through Elijah, right, that and the lessons that I start this politicization to understand Blackness politically, right, and to go down that road through Malcolm, right, is where all this happened. Is how I meet Don Pedro Albizu Campo. Through Malcolm and the NOI is how then I get connected to Puerto Rican radical politics. So by the time I'm a senior in high school, in my first year of college, 19, is when I started getting actively involved, right, in Puerto Rican political prisoner struggles and all those things. But by that point, I had started trying to read everything I could about the Black Panthers, about Malcolm, about Puerto Rico, about whatever. But that was coming through the guidance, right, of the NOI. And then when I left that for a number of different reasons. By the time I get to college, then I become a 5%er.
Right.
All of this wasn't smooth, right? All of this stuff wasn't rocking 100% with all the Puerto Ricans who I had on one side, be they family members or friends, because we're always coming back and forth to New Haven. And it also wasn't rocking 100% with those, right, who consider so-called African Americans on the other side, right, who didn't see me as real Black or authentic Black because I was Puerto Rican. But what I was also understanding as I got older and through the sort of like self-education through Malcolm, right, and Don Pedro, and finding people like Arturo Schomburg and all these folks, was that my mom, even though my mom doesn't hold radical politics or revolutionary politics, my mom walks through this earth and always has as a Black woman, as a dark-skinned Black woman who moved from Santurce, Puerto Rico when she was about 7 years old, grew up in the Bronx, right, her whole life or whatever, but moved through life as a Black woman. And so the lessons she would teach us came through the lens of a Black woman. And so even when we're in this suburb, right, by the time we get there, my mom is giving us having to talk with us. Don't look at police directly in their eyes because they'll kill you. Don't run away from the police because this is 1992, because they'll kill you. Don't, talk back to the police because they'll kill you. Be careful with these white women when you're walking on the street or whatever, because they'll say something and then the police will kill you, or the white people will kill you. My mom didn't subscribe to like my positions as a hardcore little NOI meeting going. I'm like, Yakub's grafted devil and this and that, and boom. Like, she didn't subscribe to all that. But when it came to our safety, right, and in her best way of preparing us for life, you could see the Black, right? And I could understand it. Even if she didn't understand, she's given through life. Me learning could see the political Blackness, right, coming out through her lived experience as a Black woman, regardless of where she came from in the United States, right? And everything she's
experienced. Where did you go to?
So I went to the Southern Connecticut State University.
Okay.
Right. And so
when you were there, because you were already politicized at some level when you got there, did you take Black and Puerto Rican studies and like join the organizations?
So we didn't have those studies, right? So my school didn't have all of that. So I didn't get accepted to college because I was wilding out in high school and just like, I had it with you people, right? You devils this and you devils that. I didn't get accepted to any college. And so I went to the university part-time. At the time, the university didn't have those programs. So we had like a organization Latin American students. We had a BSU, but we didn't have those types of classes in my university. So a lot of the stuff that I was learning was coming by way of political prisoner work, being able to meet movement veterans, being able to meet former Panthers or Puerto Rican veterans. A lot of Eyes on the Prize documentaries on PBS, right? It was a lot of learning, and then trying to process my experience growing up in that suburb, and then moving back to New Haven for college. So we were in that suburb for like 4 years, moving back, but you're coming back with a different lens. That 15 minutes up at I-95 exists a completely different world, where my school wasn't underfunded, where the lunches were good, where we had brand new books, where there was like teachers, and you know what I'm saying? Like it was a completely different world, just 15 minutes away from where I was growing up, right?
Mine is 18 miles away. So from Elsford, New York to the Bronx, Westchester Avenue, to this day, my dad still has his business over almost about to be 60 years. That's weird. That I get that, because you're going back and forth in these 5 days, like our schools and like if computers existed, we all would have had one. If iPad, like there were no metal detectors. My freaking one of my trips was to Spain, Portugal, Morocco in high school.
Yeah.
So we probably had that same kind of that public education, where now it would be seen as like private, and then negotiating everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it starts through there, and then once you get to college and you start reading other folks, and you start reading Fanon, and you start reading, right, and being introduced to all these other things, then I start to understand, right, that for a big piece, if we put the culture stuff to the side, right, and all of those roots, I'm Black because the state says I'm Black.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Black because I suffer the consequences for not being white in a settler country, right? And this is for none. I am rich because I'm white. Yeah. I'm white because I am rich, right? And that colonization. And so through that, then being able to then identify not only my own colonial thinkings and uprisings, but then being able to identify it, right, in New Haven, being able to identify it in Puerto Rican communities, being able to identify it in Black communities, right, and going through that process, where it was a challenge, because it wasn't like everybody was on that, right? This is like 1996 we're talking about. Folks really weren't on that wave, so you get shrugged off for like, man, go ahead with all that Malcolm X stuff, go ahead with all that, Chuck D shit or whatever they would say at the time. And it wasn't really on that wave. But I think that
my mom was like, wait, you're Black now? I was like, oh. She's like, so you're Black? What? And I was like, no, Mom, because once I got into Black studies, it was a wrap. Like, my experience, the Latinos hated me. on my college campus to this day. Like, you know, how many times have me and you maybe done a panel and they're like, oh, can we not talk about that race thing? And we're like, no, like, stop. I just have always felt more loved and engaged, particularly in African American organizations. But I wonder, did you have that experience, or was it like already out? Was it an experience where you would get invited to do something as you become an organizer and they said, well, we want to talk about race, so we don't talk about that?
For me, it wasn't directly like that, but there was kind of like you would get like, so again, if I brought up lessons, right, that I learned through the NOI or
Mhm.
5% experiences or just identifying as Black, right? And you
Right.
do this as well. It's like Black Puerto Rican, right? I don't do like Afro or, you know, it's just I'm Black Puerto Rican because I felt like it's a political statement as well. Again, going back to, right, our lived reality here in this country. And so there'll be folks who will kind of like try to differentiate the two or try to separate the two. I don't think it wasn't as extreme as we have now with a lot of the nativist politic that's taken over or is really growing within, right, US Black communities. But
Yeah.
you always had these sort of like on both sides of the coin, right? Where I'm either not real Black or Black enough for some folks, or you're saying too much Black because it sounds like you're ashamed of your nationality. But it
Yep.
folks is misinformation. It comes from their miseducation and not
Mhm.
understanding the concepts of nationality, not understanding the concepts of race, not understanding those things within the context of colonized people inside a settler colony, right? There's like all these different layers that you have to like break down and understand that for people, if you're not doing that knowledge and you're not around folks who can guide that, right, and shape that and really call you on and point these things out, then you're going to be susceptible to all kinds of reactionary shit on both sides. On both sides, if it comes from like anti-Blackness from one side, or if
Yeah.
it comes from a kind of like U.S. exceptionalist,
Yeah.
nativist on the other side. But for me, the way I overcame that was that what I learned from Nation of Gods and Earth, right? You show and prove. Everything had to be actual fact. You had
Right.
to show the fact and prove and show and prove. If not, then you out here
Yeah.
you speaking
Nobody's trying to hear
spookism,
you. Yeah. Yeah.
you speaking spookism, you speaking, you know, all kinds of trick knowledge or whatever, right? You had to show, and so I was confident in what I knew. I was confident in what I had studied. I was confident in what I had lived and was able to do that. And when you do that, it also checks everyone else, and they're forced to, right, or go along with that because it's like I'm not giving it up. I'm not going to stop saying I'm Black. I'm not going to stop saying I'm Puerto Rican. I'm not going to, right, with full understanding of what each of those mean, right? And it doesn't mean that the experience of my experience is 100% going to be the same exact experience of the Black community or so-called African Americans in this nation, because that is a very specific history, right? It's a very specific context inside of this settler colonial nation that we live, right? I also understand that my experience, my lived experience, isn't going to be that of like Puerto Ricans on the islands versus those of us here, right? But that also that my experience is going to be different from white skinned Puerto
Yeah.
Ricans who couldn't understand, who could only understand things in concepts of nationality, but not race, because they never had to suffer the consequences, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't have to bear the weight of carrying that Black crown that you carry on your skin in this racist white
Mm.
settler country, right? And so understood that I live in a very particular dynamic that requires me to understand probably better than most and to research probably better than most, right? All of these different dynamics to be able to navigate, but not just navigate, connect the dots for those for whom the dots aren't connected. And again, bringing that back to what I learned through Elijah, what I learned right through the 5% is to bring light into the dark, right, and to make knowledge born to those who didn't know. I'm not gonna right the blind, deaf, and dumb as they would put it. I'm not gonna go that far, but it was like there's dots that needed to be connected because our schools are not teaching us this. right? Our communities, unfortunately, are not teaching us this. And those who hold that knowledge, you and I both know, were locked away in prison for decades and decades and decades on end, which is our introductory to activism, is trying to get them out, right? Our
You
former
know,
political.
there's mad people wanting to, I'm like, they want to book you. Like, this is the most views. Sorry, man. There's so many things in the chat. So I think one of the things too is that, well, I know one of the things, particularly sorry, y'all. Being Puerto Rican, as with African Americans, we have United States citizenship. We didn't ask for it. We have it. And to me, that's a very specific history. And it's one to be like talked about and celebrated. Not saying like Puerto Rico, we as Boricuas don't have other ethnicities and people that we build with. Also, we also don't have the immigrant experience as well. It's migration. And for me, I think in hearing you say this, it's then, as you said, it's the politic now. It's not just because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm Black now. Well, what does that mean? So in saying that, I'm just gonna say, so you're getting match shout outs, peace, Hiram. All right, you're good. Yep. Let me see. Afro Latinos have always been in existence. Yes, absolutely. I would say yes, but language is very different. You are not Black American. Black Americans are special people. So I get that. And I think that speaks to ADOS, obviously. And if we're with Schomburg, we're Black, peace. Okay. All right. Look, I think one of the things is that you bring up, like, I'm not going to allow anybody to shame me because I am a Black Puerto Rican. It just speaks to the not understanding like international, but understanding the politic of Pan-Africanism. So is that the same experience for you? The politics come through that understanding as well? Being a Pan-Africanist?
Those politics came through, right? So it's my political education that first started through the NOI and the 5%ers, and then was formalized in places like the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, in the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, in different organizations, and most importantly, meeting elders, right? And so having relationships with, elders like Nahanda Abiodun, who was
Rest in freedom.
who was charged with being a part of the team to liberate Assata Shakur from prison, and was also exiled in Cuba, right? Being able to correspond with people like Dr. Mutulu Shakur, and different, different political prisons throughout the years. And so those politics come by way of that, and also the lived experience, right? Again, being a Black person in this country, and to be able to understand. I think it also comes from being in these organizations, right? Like 5%ers, like the Nation of Islam, that are grounded and rooted in the historical context of Black people in this country, right? Which has to be understood and respected, right? I think, part of the nativist stuff that you have with the ADOS or the FBAs and that sort of thing, it's not anything new. That's always existed. As there's been Black people in this country. That phenomena has always existed, right? I think that what happens is that through misinformation, through colonization, right, and miseducation, there's not enough time and effort put into folks. And when I say folks, I'm talking about newly arrived folks into the country, or folks from other parts of the African diaspora, doing the knowledge to the history of Black people in this country and what that meant, right, and what that means, both economically and politically. And this is where the Marxism comes in, right? And this is why I said it goes back to Fanon, right? I am Black because I'm not white, right? I'm rich because I'm white. I'm rich. That whole thing, right? Understanding what it means, what it's meant to be Black in this country, what it means to be Black in this country, what that means for U.S. empire, for the growth of U.S. capitalism, for the growth of U.S. wealth, right? That has created the conditions that we see today. And respecting that and understanding it. And on the flip side, understanding that that's just one side of the coin. That
Right.
thing is happening in the U.S. as colonies, right? So while it's a lot of cotton and tobacco over here, it's sugar and tobacco over there. That same thing is happening over there at the hands of the same white people for the same benefit, right? In the same way you use race and gender and all these right class divisions to divide folks to keep you away from uniting against the actual enemies of the people who are the sitting ruling class, we end up being pigeonholed into and falling susceptible to the trick
Yep.
knowledge and the bullshit that is spit to us that's meant to divide us, as opposed to right highlight those things that do unite us. Are there going to be differences?
So
Of course,
I want you to keep going. I'm just gonna let people know. I'm gonna put up some slides. So the first one y'all are seeing is by Stephen Biko, South African apartheid leader, created the ANC, but went more radical, which is why he was assassinated. But he says being Black is not a matter of pigmentation, but being Black is a reflection of a mental attitude. And the thing is, you were also learning history.
Yeah.
Right. And not only American, but obviously Puerto Rican history and finding out things, and then our political prisoners. And I'm glad you even mentioned the Nation of Islam, because when I was being attacked as a student leader in being president of the Black Student Union, but then went hard against the Zionists and just like physically got attacked, and someone broke into my crib, right? Like it was the Nation of Islam here, Minister Muhammad, who was like, oh, that won't happen again. I'm glad you bring that up, because I think a lot of younger people that are watching, if they even know the NOI, if they even have Nation of Islam, if they know the name of Louis Farrakhan, most of it will be negative. And there's things to say about the Nation of Islam. There's also real concrete things to say that many African-American Latino men in prisons, some of them convert to religion and some of them convert to Malcolm X.
Right.
You know?
Right. I mean, with all its contradictions, right? And looking at this quote by Steve Biko, for me, it's Black is a politic.
Absolutely.
Again, political classifications, right? Like whiteness and Blackness is created in this country as a to designate
as their politic
different people, to legalize the apartheid that existed in this country, to legalize the stealing of both indigenous land, right? But the robbery of Black labor and Black bodies to develop U.S. right capital and to position the United States to be in the imperial power that it is today. And so Black is a political designation. So when I said like I don't never identify as like Afro, what do you call F? It's Black because it is a political designation, right? That does not, and in that political designation, understanding where I live, then it's also a responsibility. So it's not just a political designation, but it's also a responsibility.
Right. We ain't just going out there to be like, oh, we Black too. No, like
and to learn and to know the history of Blackness and my people right in the Caribbean, but also the folks here and the way the contexts are different and how that shapes out, and to understand and honor both of those histories, right? It's not to get into, again, these reactionary positions of differentiating between whatever the diaspora, splitting up the diaspora, because that's never been a thing for our leaders, right? If you go from Malcolm to DuBois, or that's never been a thing. That is a reactionary response to, concerns and issues of people feeling like their needs are not being met. But again, you're asking the devil who put you in that bondage, who put you in that situation, right, to recognize you, and you're turning your ire at other people who look like you because the devil told you to do that. Again, that's the trick knowledge and whatever. We don't have to get too deep.
And it's white supremacy. Like it's when we talk about colonizing our lands, we decolonize them. We got to decolonize our minds, like Richie Perez always talked about. Bello Malo, when it kicked that out, and when it becomes about colorism, for me, that becomes problematic. But I'm curious to know your take on
real quick. It's colonization.
It's
colonization. So it's the colonization of our countries. So if you're talking about Puerto Rico, that has been colonized since Columbus arrived in
Right.
1493, right? Puerto Rico is the oldest colony in the world, like official colony in the world.
Yep.
That whole Caribbean has been colonized since 1492. It has never not known colonization. The only country in so-called Latin America and the Caribbean that has gone through that process and still has not completed the full decolonization is Cuba. Everywhere else is still under some form of U.S. colonization, either direct colonization like Puerto Rico is, or neo-colonialism, the way the rest are. And then for the British West Indies, right, it is English colonialism or French, right? We see the vestiges of colonization. Black people in this country, so-called African American, are a colonized nation, is a nation within a nation. So when I go back to Black being a politic, I learned that again from the NOI. I learned that from the Messenger. Right, Elijah. Regardless of all the critiques, and we can talk about, you know, all the different things about troubling with Elijah Muhammad, right? But the NOI were the beginning, right? Who took on what later became for the communists the Black Belt thesis, this notion that Black people in this country comprised a nation, inside a nation, that deserved its own piece of land, that there was no salvation in this wilderness of North America for Black people, that there will never be any salvation for Black people under this system and living with these people side by side, that Black people needed their own country. That later morphs into the Black Belt thesis with Harry Hayward and the Communist Party, right? Communist Party USA. And then it becomes the Republic of New Africa with the Obadele brothers, right? And so Steve Biko, and when I talk about Black being a politic and a responsibility, it comes again back through Elijah and these folks who recognize that there is no salvation. So when we're dealing with reactionary, well-funded reactionary movements, be they the ADOs, be the FBAs, or be they reactionary movements, very hardcore nationalist movements in the DR or in Puerto Rico or whatever, right? That comes as a way of trying to maintain that colonization and hold that colonization, because Haiti proved what is possible. Haiti proved what is possible for Black people in this whole hemisphere in 1804. And the United States and Europe has been doing everything possible to make sure that that never happens again, right? And so I think for us, I wanted to make that statement because we see Steve Biko. This also goes back to Sekou Touré, because you talked about the Pan-Africanism. Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, right, in Africa, who also talked about Fidel and Fidel Castro, right, and saying that Fidel was politically African because of what he did, right? Because of the fights and the struggles that he fought in Angola, right? And to help liberate and break apartheid in South Africa. His commitment to the continent of Africa, because we understood that as long as the continent is not free, none of us in its diaspora are ever going to be free.
And I'm glad you said that for the understanding of Castro, because obviously phenotypically white, light, but when you look, because he's also organizing around working class. And I think that's the hardest. I think that's the part that's always left out, even currently right now. Like, we have to understand what working class means. We have to understand Marxism, capitalism, even seeing this moment right now, right? It's about hyper capitalism. It's not about humanity. So they're going to do whatever to do that. And that includes, you know, there's a reason they want to come down on historians. You know, I spent my whole life being a historian, you know, and there's a reason why they want to erase everything. Because they want to erase us and just make us workers or laborers without ever being people or cultures, nationality, being free, having humanity, water, food. They don't want that for us. And I think people better really right now take this very seriously.
Right.
Especially seeing what we're seeing in Puerto Rico, Hiram, and a younger Boricua diaspora. I am, you know, so happy to see younger folks being like, wait a minute, those are Black Boricua. I grew up in Louisa. I'm not going to hide it anymore. I'm not going to hide A, B, C, D, E, F. Because I know that when me and you were in the crux of it, it wasn't always easy. But we have an incredible understanding of, again, Pan-Africanism, the politics, but also how this nation, this country treats its own citizens, i.e. African American and Puerto Ricans.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, I mean, it's become real popular, a lot more popular. I'm gonna say more popular now to identify as like Afro, Latino, Black, whatever mix of the words and letters you put together, right? Than it was before. But sometimes it gets a little too loosey goosey for me with that too, right? And so when I say Black, and when I'm talking about those of us who read as Black, who are seen as Black,
Yes.
right? Not those who feel Black in your soul and through heritage and whatever. That's beautiful. You should hold on to that and honor that as well, and use that to see yourself in other people. But you have to understand where we live. Being seen and read as Black comes with consequences. And so if your daily experiences are not those of someone who is read and is seen as Black and therefore having to suffer the consequences of that, right? Then you need to acknowledge that when you're running around identifying as like, I'm Afro this, I'm Afro that as well, right? Because like I said, it becomes a responsibility not to just say it and be like, cool and whatever, right? But then what are we going to do about that? There are just, and what and this, what are we going to do about that? I think is for everyone. And so when folks are talking about communities, Black communities, right? And there is no Black community. I always understand it as a Black nation. If you're talking about just so-called African Americans, right? Black people in this country, but US born Black folks. You're talking about 46 million people. That's not a community, that's a nation. Alone, it would make up the 33rd largest country in the world.
Wait, what would make up the say it again?
So what we understand is the Black community, right? The African American community is not a community, it's a nation of about 46 million people. There are more Black people in this country than there are people total in Canada. Right? That is power.
That's some knowledge you just dropped.
That is power. I'm not talking about economic power. I'm talking about the day that if just that group of people alone, and you saw it through the civil rights movement, you've seen it through the abolition of slavery, you've seen it in these moments in US history, what that means, that when Black people are able to wield that power politically in this country and shift, you see it post-Reconstruct, right, during Reconstruction, you see it, all that, what that does, and then ends up benefiting everybody in the country, right, and kind of like lifting all the boats. The United States does not want that ever to happen again, or even come close to what we were experiencing in the 60s and 70s. Because when you had the Panthers, when you had these Black radical movements and revolutionary organizations, right, aligning themselves with other colonized nations in the country, but playing the position of the vanguard, but not telling folks, you not us, and you'll never be us, and this and that, and doing that sort of like nativist FBA thing that is happening now. But instead, right, recognizing, understanding this is our history, this is our position, this is what it means to be Black in this country, being able to see ourselves in each other as kin while respecting the histories and the differences in the context and the circumstances that we did the time to study and learn, so that you don't disrespect, right, and you find your lane. Man, that sent a shockwave through the country.
Right.
We have been in a counter-revolutionary moment since then. They
yeah.
killed our leaders. They imprisoned them. They went all out. The mass incarceration in the 80s boom, the crack and the cocaine and the heroin and all that, right? The U.S. has been really, really fighting to the, and as the United States and U.S. capitalism is in decline now, it is again really important that it is able to control its Black population in one way or another, through misinformation, through, again, these reactionary forces like the ADOs and the FBAs, through all that, because it is them who history has proven in this country hold the potential, right, to kick off revolution in this country. And not just an anti-capitalist socialist revolution in this country, the detonators of revolution that then would set it off across the entire hemisphere. And so for us who identify as and identify with our Blackness, one, but hold a nationality, right, with another land, because we have to acknowledge and understand that the United States denies nationality to its Black people here. And oftentimes there is a misunderstanding between those of us who are so-called Latinos and folks who are so-called African Americans, when it's like the jokes about me no black, I'm Dominican, I'm not black, I'm right, where people are confusing race with nationality. One is right, and you don't understand because race is not spoken, like you said, race is not spoken of in our nations,
Yeah.
our communities, right? We are sold the myth of Vasconcelos and those folks of the grand family, right? La Gran Familia, the cosmic family, that we're this beautiful mixture of indigenous and African and European.
Yeah.
That,
So I call it the 1/3 theory. I'm like, don't
right?
even like, I'm
But
like, you have no clue when you say that ridiculousness. But also, you're right. As much as we've seen, particularly a new generation, claim their blackness, for the most part, I find it to be a brand or marketing, right? Like it's not that we've been doing the work, this is who we are. So that whole kind of now, like the same thing with indigenous people, they're like in vogue and then not, and it's like, oh, I'm black. I'm like, dude, are you really like, and not taken as phenotype. And we like an example of that is Richie Torres, blacker than black, congressional representative from the Bronx. That's a horrible human being. He hates queer people, and he's queer. He has the trans. He's not trans, but gay. He has said some awful things. Then he wants to now be Puerto Rico being the 51st state. That's why, like, you're right about this explosion. I think it has been captured mostly for marketing and not a black politic. And that people got to understand all skin color, that's not all kin folk. And I think maybe there's a bigger understanding, but when it comes to blackness, the flip side that I've seen also in movements, including movements, is like non-black person of color, or you can't be in this space because you're light. I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is white supremacy. This is what Fanon talked about. This, like, who does it benefit to divide and conquer?
it is the consequences, right, of this period of counter-revolution, of the defeat of our organizations in the 70s, the assassination of our leaders, right, the imprisonment of our leaders. And there are no revolutionary black organizations that exist anymore in that way. And so there has been an ideological and theoretical vacuum that has existed for a long time, has been filled with liberal nonsense that is coming out of academia that breaks it down into all these different, different things, but has nothing to do with the actual material conditions of everyday poor and working people, right? It can only speak in the abstract of all these other sort of things, but doesn't deal with the actual material realities of everyday people, right, in our communities. And so it is why a tiny niche group of individuals who hold on to this nativist position, like the ADOs and the FBAs, can have so much of a platform. They don't represent everybody else, but it's also why so many people in our own communities can still hold on to backward thinking, backward cultural practice around hair colors, or this notion that we somehow have surpassed race because we are this beautiful amalgamation and mixture of these three people, right? Is because there is a vacuum ideologically and politically and theoretically that comes as a result of the defeat and destruction of our organizations back in the 70s and 80s. We need to rebuild those.
So do you think, Hiram, like in Puerto Rico, because now we're seeing definitely young generation like out proud, supported Black Lives Matter, La Feminista Colectiva, like all these incredible organizations. Do you think that politic is missing, particularly on the island around and those that are in political organizations? Do you think the politic is still not as maybe radical or revolutionary it should be?
I think what has happened in Puerto Rico is what you see is non-profitization of the movement, right? And so post Maria, when everything was wiped away, what you ended up having was a lot of influx of philanthropic dollars that props up different
Mm.
organizations based off different things, right? But because you are coming out of philanthropy led, right, process and struggles, then everything becomes siloed. Because what philanthropy does through its grants is it silos everything as if all of our issues are in it. So the issues with public schools has nothing to do with your issue of public housing. Your housing has nothing to do with the fights around Medicare. Medicare has nothing to do with the issues of incarceration. And so you fight all these things in silos, independent of each other, when we as poor working people, Black, brown, yellow people in this country understand that we experience all of those things at the same time.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm.
The same
Yeah.
way that we experience and depending on who we are, right, experience race, class, and gender oppression all at the same time. Right. And so what has happened is that what is lost again is the ideology and a theory. And so these groups oftentimes don't speak of capitalism in a way that is articulating an assessment, a material assessment of capital, right? How it's impacting the conjunction, the current collection of crises in the moment, right? And then articulating a way out by way of using what all of our leaders from Fanon, Malcolm, to Cabral, to everybody, right? The Marxist method, dialectical historical materialism, to be able to identify who are all the forces economically, socially, and politically who are creating the crisis, impacting us and enslaving us today. We instead hop on these things around identity, around like phenotypes, around that sort of thing, which must be fought. We have to fight anti-Blackness in our communities as we struggle for a free Puerto Rico. We
Do
have
you
to
think,
fight
though, let me ask you
xenophobia.
around this anti-Blackness, because I do have a problem with it as it has morphed into basically saying that all Latino, like that we're all anti-Black. I mean, I have a serious criticism of that. I know that we're not, but it goes back to what you just said too, around like the nonprofits and academia, right? So it's like, whose purpose is that to say all 65, 70 million of us are anti-Black? The whole world's anti-Black,
Black.
but also where's the policy? Like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, we don't have policy positions or things being like, we're all anti-Black. This whole country right
Eh,
now is
I
showing
don't,
us that shit don't matter.
I
You
don't,
look the way you do, you're
yeah,
done.
I don't waste time with that, right?
Okay.
Folks who
Yeah,
speak in absolutes, right?
like,
I don't waste time with that because I know, because on the flip side we hear all the same thing too, right? That all Black people, blah 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 blah, right?
right.
And all whatever. I spent my whole life. I told you, I came in through the Nation of Islam. I was a 5%er, right? My friends, my family, everything. I have been around Black people, African American, my whole entire life, right? From politically, socially, culturally, romantically, everything. I
Mm,
know for a fact through lived experience that that is not true. That every single blah 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 blah, right? So if you're telling me that every single one means that you have never met, you're not around, right? And so I don't care what you have to say because it's not factually true. You
right.
can't still improve that. Again, going back to my lessons through Elijah and the 5%ers, you can't show and prove that to be true, right? But history has shown us the opposite.
Right.
History has shown us the opposite, and vice versa. And so I don't waste time with that. Again, when we're talking about the movements, we're talking about what is now, right? We need to build revolutionary organizations that are able to teach young people and older people, like everybody, how to be able to make accurate assessments of the current moment that we're living in, to be able to identify what are the economic, the social, the political forces that are impacting our material realities today, right? To put that in its historical context, to then show us the way forward, right? And through that is when we can then articulate to the people why they're in the material, right, positions that they're in. Then we can start connecting the dots, because you can't go to the hood, any hood, talking just a whole bunch of revolutionary stuff when
Yeah.
people are trying to like feed their
You're like,
family. They're
right.
trying to,
Or like
let's go switch it.
the Pew research has shown that like 94% of our people don't even know what Latinx is, but that's what you said. It immediately gets hijacked, right? So that it was Afro-Latinidad, which was not Afro at all. And then like all these forces in academia, but what you're speaking to, okay, fam, okay. I'm supposed to wrap up. I don't want to keep Hiram too much longer, but I will say this is the most watched show. Everybody's showing you mad love. FBA and ADOS folks, I know, I get it. That's your thing. I not what I even deal with, honestly. Like, but I think the lesson I agree with you, but those are very small pockets of mindset. We try to lift y'all up. It's okay. Okay, but thank you everybody
One
for.
thing I want to say with all of this, right, is what's needed to go back to organizations PR, but also organizations here in this country, is that we got to get back to deep organizing.
Yeah,
we have to get back to talking to the people and being among the people, right? And it is through that process of working with. This is what the Panthers taught. This is what Malcolm taught. This is what Ella taught. This is what Richie Perez taught. This is what the Lords taught, right? Is that you have to be among the people. Hear from them what they are struggling with, what they're dealing with, then be able to connect the dots for them to show them who are the institutions, who are the people, what are the systems that are impacting that.
Yeah, that's on us.
Raise their revolutionary consciousness. This is George Jackson, right? To help raise their revolutionary consciousness, to then be able to prepare them to step into that role. The revolution ain't just going to come right now. We have to do that work of getting in there and not just talking to the people, but talking to the people who don't think like us, talking to the people who don't agree with us, talking to the people who may have been fed generations of anti-Marxism, who have been fed all kinds of misinformation, right? And do that patient work with our people, not throwing them away because they don't have the perfect politics, not throwing them away because they don't have the perfect language, but doing that work to address their material conditions, fight for what is rightfully ours, right? Theirs, and raise that level so ultimately we can do the work that has to be done, which is tear down this Babylon, right? And destroy it once and for all to lift the chains off the rest of the world.
I'm glad, because I think that everybody wants you to come on again, which it will happen. Thank you, everybody. Just real quick. Look, I think where we're at now, I find that I'm not going to spend my time in those time spaces. Like, I don't have time to explain to y'all. Like, what we're seeing right now is a full automated techno-authoritative state that is using every surveillance tool possible to disappear us, put us in jail, whatever is happening. I'm like, we have to know what you said. We have to be very clear on what's happening. There's like no wiggle room. There's no like middle ground. They are telling us exactly what they want to do. I think though the class analysis is what's missing in Latinos born in this country, because I know personally, I never heard of anything until even maybe really understood capitalism, and racial capitalism and all that till I became a grad student and really like, okay, because there was a speaker on Democracy Now! Today, a labor organizer, and he, for me, the way he framed it was beautiful. He was like, we understand that us losing our jobs and then losing our jobs to the federal government, which many people know are good jobs and retirement and pension. He said, but it's going to come down hard on the working class people. And we're already seeing it. People can't apply for WIC. People's SNAP benefits come down. They're telling people you're not going to get your Social Security. Like, this is a full billionaire attack us and take like, what are we going to do when they stop giving meals and our titis and their Social Security? How are people going to themselves? These are the things about that could lead to the counter revolution, right?
Yeah. And it's organizing. And I know you don't want to be in those spaces or whatever, and that's fine. But we cannot, right? Folks who have backward ideas, folks who are stuck in misinformation or whatever, especially the so-called Latino coming to this country trying to find their way out of their own personal material hell and feel that stepping on Black folks and anybody else, right, is the way to do that, needs to be engaged. And we have a responsibility. It goes back again to what I said, right? When we identify as Black in this country and we don't hide behind a flag or a separate nationality, but we take on that crown, right? We wear that crown.
I would have to talk to somebody about it and not just be like, I ain't got time for it.
We have got to wrestle with them and argue with them, but we have to make spaces. We have to make spaces where they feel like they can come in. What movement has done, unfortunately, in this last 10 years,
You're right.
it pushed a lot of people away. Be they, straight brothers. You have, Black Men Build was created because of that very reason, because there were brothers who felt that they're not welcome in so-called movement spaces. You have other, so-called Latinos or other, diasporic Africans who feel like they are not welcome in so-called spaces. You have African Americans whose whole families have been here forever, ever, and feel like they can't be in certain spaces, right? We have to undo that. And if there are those of us, right, who are able to understand that and know that, then it is our responsibility to do the work of engaging those people, wrestling with those people, fighting against their backward ideas, creating the spaces, right, where we can do that, but through work. Because I can wrestle all day with someone who wants to talk about FBA stuff and you're not real Black, you're not this or that. Wonderful, whatever. I don't care, right? What is your rent situation looking like? Are you tired of these cops on the block? Are you tired of your kids' schools being shut down or whatever? Guaranteed you're going to say, yeah, let's wrestle on this. Let's work on this because my kids' schools are dealing with that. I'm tired of these cops too. Let's wrestle on this. And through the work and addressing material conditions, then we can start building the trust with each other and identifying the real enemies, that you'll see how quick all of that stuff dismantles. The anti-Blackness that comes from so-called Latinos, the nativism that comes from other folk, you'll see how very quickly that dismantles when you're showing up for the people, when you're showing up with respect, when you're creating spaces for them to be their full selves, but also you're providing the opportunity for them to step into their leadership, into their power, and you're winning things. And when you win things that improves their material conditions, then you'll see how all that other stuff falls by the wayside. And that's when you're dealing with the whole other monster. And that's when you're going to see the repression of the state come down heavy, because it learned from the 60s, 70s of what that means.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Do you foresee that soon they will start coming, journalists and activists, regardless if you're in a group? Because we don't have a national movement right now, right? Like a lot of reasons, but they're gonna come for us. I mean, I feel like they are. Am I crazy to feel that way?
No.
Okay.
They're coming, right? They're coming. But George Jackson, Blood in My Eye, says it. Repression breeds resistance. Come.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do. You have been trying to erase us for the last 500 years, be it in Puerto Rico, be it here in the southern states of the United States, be it all over the way. You have tried. And what Mr. Charlie and the devil has not been able to do is erase us and defeat us. And they never will. History has proven they never will. They will try, but it's on us to look back at our history, look back at those who came before us, who gave us the lessons, who gave us the jewels, do the knowledge and study to prepare ourselves for that fight, because it's an inevitable fight. It was written, but we will come out on top. The makers, the owners, the cream of the planet Earth, fathers and mothers of civilization, God of the universe. That's the first lesson I learned. I am not afraid, and I am fully confident that we will win. Come what comes, we will win. Leonard Peltier stepped out of prison after almost 50 years, after almost 50, fists raised high, and said, "I'm still committed." Oscar Lopez Rivera did it. Sekou Odinga did it. Mutulu Shakur did it. Mumia Abu-Jamal, who still sits in that prison cell with COVID, with all the ailments or whatever, you know what I'm saying, still committed. Jalil Muntakim, still committed, right?
He was here this morning around the issue of the correctional facilities where CEOs are doing a wild strike and they want to call in the National Guard. I'm glad you brought up the political prisoners and the movement, because, when they're free, people are like, even with Oscar, Obama freed him, even with Leonard. Biden freed him. No. The movement did that. And young people need to understand that things can take 10 or 20 or 30 years. But I will say this, being introduced to work around political prisoners and prisoners of war, you were already in MXGM when I came in. And the same people I write, or I just never saw, how is this gonna not have, how they, no one's getting out. And they are. And the minute they all come out, I always ask you, little dude, don't you want, he's like, we ain't got time for that. We got work. I'm like, Leonard said it too. I watch Democracy Now. They got a video up today. And he, yeah, all right, I'm up in the for the rest of my life. We're going to do some work.
Right.
You know, and I guess it's like what we have to, the politic of resistance, revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, in 30 days.
El Che Guevara said it, right? El Che Guevara said it, that we have the honor, those of us in this country have the honor to be able to fight the beast in its own belly, right? That we're not in another country, we are in the middle of it, and we have the honor to be able to fight this monster right here in the heart of the empire. And so it's on us to do that work, to get involved, especially our generation, this Generation X, that I think that has pulled away, especially from the Puerto Rico politics, but from a lot of politics, kind of like pulled away because of a lot of, and that's a whole other show as to why that is, right? And you've got a lot of young people who are trying to find something outside of the nonprofit driven, right, work or whatever, but still need. And I think that there's a way that we can do that respectfully and get back in the fight. And like Leonard said, no matter how old you are, this is for the rest of your life. And so if you made that decision, like Chairman Fred said, right, if you asked to make that decision at the age of 20 and you say, I don't want to do it because I want to live a little bit longer, you dead already, right? Yeah. And so we dare to struggle, we dare to win, and that's, you know, that's our
and people, it's coming, you know, like I think, I mean, at least this is the first time in our lifetimes we've seen this kind of gangster government, like, for real. Like all the other presidents, yes, so there's something about this that, you know, it obviously is trying to destroy all of us, you know, regardless. It's just like slash and burn. We don't care about none of you. Y'all that voted for Trump, you ain't going to get your SSI. The madness, the chaos is that where the resistance actually grows better. But you have to be an organizer. You can't, like, social media is here, but it might not be here tomorrow. We don't know. And if it's not here tomorrow, are you comfortable walking on your block and talking to your neighbors? Because if you're not, that's what you allude to. That's the first level of the work. So, Hiram, first and foremost, thank you. I kept you so much longer. This is probably the most watched episode. You were getting all the high fives, claps, and I knew I had to bring you on because your mind is just sharp, and I think there's sometimes maybe when you're not in these spaces anymore for a minute, like it convoluted, you don't know how to see things right now, but I do, and that's why I wanted you to come on, because I was like, I needed to hear this. Like, you're right, you know, I have to, it is my responsibility to do that, you know, and get over, I guess, a little bit of my anger at the last 10 years, not for us, but some young people that did incredible work. And that's another whole conversation we'll have. But with that said, again, I want to thank you so much. Just let folks know how they can follow you and your work.
So one, thank you, Rosa, for having me on the show. Thank you for all the work you have done for as long as I've known you, and for years and years and years. And it is my absolute joy to be able to refer to you as Dr. Rosa Clemente, because I know all the work that you put in to doing that. And so you know, Dr. Clemente, thank you so very much. You know, you can find the organization, again, is Community Resource Hub, and so on the social media it's at C Resource Hub, all one word. And that's where you can see like a lot of the work and a lot of the videos and stuff like that. I'm not super active on social media like that, and so that one is that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. or just contact Dr. Clemente and Dr. Clemente?
I know people will like the like can I was like, yeah, he needs to do big speaking engagements. I know sometimes that's not your thing, but sometimes, you know, people want to see you in mass. And also tomorrow, fam, unfortunately, tomorrow is always a sad day. That is the day where on the 21st, Malcolm X was assassinated in New York City. I personally, what I do on this day tomorrow is I just listen to Message to the Grassroots and every Malcolm documentary, but I encourage everybody to really listen to Message to the Grassroots. I think it's his the pinnacle as an orator.
Yeah.
Kind of where he was internationally. Y'all know Hiram, we'll bring him back. Just continue to follow me on YouTube. We'll continue to grow the show. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you for all your time, my comrade. And, you know, I will soon, hermano. And thank you
All right.
for
Love
well.
Bye-bye.
Love you too. Bye. Thank you, everybody, with comments, and I appreciate the engaging. So share all the love, you know, from for Hiram. I think he's really genius. He always really makes me think and kind of just, all right, take a step back, committed to this work. You just like leave when it's this, it's hard. So come to my YouTube page, follow our sponsor, Operation Jackson. Please follow our work. I know some people were on last week and really got some good ideas of how to begin to organize in their local community. It seems that more and more people are definitely like, this is where I am, this is what I'm going to do the work, you know? So we'll bring Hiram as much as he can be on, because he's always on point. So again, Disrupt the Chaos Wednesdays at 7, Can't Stop Our Blackness Thursdays at 7. And follow me on social media, follow Hiram, all my guests, and follow Cooperation Jackson, and take the time to listen to the shows around the night. All right, fam. On Instagram lives this week. And if not, I'll see everybody Wednesday and next Thursday. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of Disrupt the Chaos. Peace, fam.
That was Rosa Clemente, Can't Stop Our Blackness, speaking with organizer Hiram Rivera. You can follow Sister Rosa here on YouTube at Rosa Clemente. And as always, if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to Sister Rosa's channel, subscribe to Rootwork, and subscribe to Black Liberation Media. Until next time, peace.